On the road to 2024, 1 year away from the next presidential election, we give you a preview of what to look for.
Live from Washington, we bring the latest on the political climate before the election.
Debating foreign policy on campaign stages, we spoke to experts about America's involvement abroad.
And bringing it back to campus, we ask NU students how old is too old to run for president.
We've got those stories and more tonight on Politicat.
It's your politics right now.
Good evening and happy Election Day. Welcome to our Politicat special, Road to the 2024 Elections. I'm Lance Wilhelm.
And I'm Lena Peterson. With the 2024 race in full swing, there's a lot to keep an eye on.
And tonight, we'll be your source on information for the upcoming race.
There are currently 15 candidates running in the election, 9 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 2 independents. Incumbent President Joe Biden leads the Democratic race, joined by 3 challengers. According to Quinnipiac University, President Biden is receiving 77% support among Democrats, with the remaining candidates receiving less than 10% each.
Former President Donald Trump announced his candidacy for the Republican nomination last November. He's leading in polls against a packed list of candidates. Here's the full list of Republicans still in the race. 4 Republicans have already dropped out, including former Vice President Mike Pence. Coming up, in the next few months, the Iowa caucuses will be held on January 15th, with state primary elections following in March and April. At the end of August, the Democratic National Convention will be held right here in Chicago.
To start off, Politicat's Angela Jiang is joining us from Washington, bringing us latest updates in D.C. and their implications for the coming election year.
The air here in Washington is tense. It's been 2 weeks since Mike Johnson was elected the new House Speaker, but certain members of Congress are concerned over his involvement in the 2020 presidential election. Johnson was one of the Republicans filing a brief in a lawsuit to overturn the result, though it was quickly rejected by the Supreme Court. Some lawmakers worry how he'll oversee the 2024 results if he's reelected next fall. Meanwhile, Biden is seeking a second presidential term amid political divisions over the U.S.'s involvement in Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas war. Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke on the phone yesterday. Though Biden's remained steadfast in his support for Israel, some citizen groups like Veterans for Peace are calling for a complete ceasefire. Netanyahu said to ABC this morning, quote, "There will be no ceasefire without the release of our hostages." And today, voters hit the polls in state legislatures across 40 different states. A key fight over abortion access takes place just miles away in Virginia. On the road to 2024, these issues and more on the Hill's docket. From Washington, D.C., this is Angela Jiang.
Thank you so much, Angela. We will keep following your reporting in Washington.
And we're less than 24 hours away from the 3rd Republican presidential debate in Miami. 5 candidates will be on the stage: Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Senator Tim Scott, and Vivek Ramaswamy.
Since the last debate, former Vice President Pence suspended his campaign, and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum failed to meet the polling threshold to qualify.
Joining us now are Braden Spate and Logan Schijano for more on what we can expect on stage. First, to both of you, who can gain the most from this debate?
Lance, that's a great question. For me, I have to say Ron DeSantis. The Florida governor is virtually tied with Nikki Haley in some new Iowa polling, and he's recently been on the attack when it comes to going after Haley's foreign policy stances. They've been in a dispute about the Israel-Palestine situation, with DeSantis saying that all Palestinians in Gaza are anti-Semitic. Haley has opted for a less extreme stance, and DeSantis is going to try to paint Haley as not in line with the far-right part of the Republican Party. Also with China, he has a new ad out, or his PAC has a new ad out attacking Haley and some of the decisions she made as governor with regard to China and Chinese businesses in South Carolina. So look for that dynamic to play out on stage tomorrow night.
Yeah, but Logan, I think I really differ with you here because I personally think that Nikki Haley has the most to gain from this simply because she is kind of fighting for that second place position. So if she can have a really strong showing next week, I think it could be just enough to kind of put her over the edge if she really shows that she's hard on certain stances, she has a strong foreign policy, and she's able to combat the attacks that are going to come from people who might not be polling as high as her and are trying to, take that kind of third position away from her.
And looking at their campaigns and previous performances on debate stages, who do you think might be losing ground in this race?
Well, for me, Vivek Ramaswamy is kind of limping into the third Republican presidential debate. He really caught the attention of people who maybe had never heard of him before in that first debate. But frankly, I think just some Republicans are starting to get annoyed with him, and he's really trying to be a newer version of Donald Trump, and I think for some people who are looking for something new, that lane is not the best for him. He's polling at about 4 or 5% nationally and in Iowa. So for me, I think we might be nearing the end of the road when it comes to a Vivek Republican candidacy.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to agree with you. He's losing a lot of steam and fast.
And again, Donald Trump will not make an appearance in tomorrow's debate. He chose not to participate in the first debate, but he still had a massive lead in national polls. Logan, without Trump there, how much will these debates actually matter?
Yeah, that's a great question. You have to think, this is the third presidential debate for the Republicans. Anyone who's probably tuned into the first one probably has a pretty good idea of who might be their top choice of the people on stage. And in those first two debates, Lance, specifically that second debate when I was watching, it took over an hour for Trump to be mentioned at all amongst the candidates. And, a lot of them have not gone directly at Trump, aside from Chris Christie. Occasionally DeSantis said in the last debate that Trump should be there, but for the most part, they've really been walking on thin ice. I'm interested to see if that changes, especially with this debate being moderated by a couple anchors from NBC. We'll see if the questions are more tailored to Trump and some of his legal troubles.
And Braden, even though Trump won't be there on the debate stage, he certainly won't be staying silent.
Yeah, that's right, Lena. As always, we know that, Trump likes to offer an alternative to programming, as he said that he doesn't like to show up to the, these presidential debates. So on that, next week, he will be in Hialeah, Florida, which is about 30 minutes outside of Miami, which, as we know, is kind of Ron DeSantis's, state, his territory. And so he's really hoping to secure that Latino vote because, as we know, in 2020, Biden won that vote out. And so he was able to secure those votes. So I think by, having a rally in a district in an area that is primarily about 95% Latino and Hispanic voters, which is in Hialeah, Florida, I think he's really going to have that opportunity to, garner support from that base and show why he's supporting them and why they should vote with him over, their governor, DeSantis. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you, Braden and Logan, for keeping an eye on the candidates and the debates. Coming up, is Bidenomics a bust? A look at how voters are reacting to the president's economic strategy.
Plus, debating overseas funding, why approving another aid package faces an uphill climb in Congress.
My narrative, since I've been locked up and kind of made my transition, has been like redemption, accountability.
When I come into the classroom environment, every individual that sits amongst me takes education seriously.
economy continues to be a top issue for voters. According to a recent poll conducted by ABC News and Ipsos, 74% of respondents expressed that the economy is very important to them. Politicat's Fiona Bolzen is here to break down how the economy has been doing since Biden came to office and how candidates are touting it for their campaigns.
According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, inflation has steadily come down since January, starting at 6% in the beginning of 2023 and reaching nearly 4% in September. And according to the Department of Commerce, the U.S. economy grew by an annualized rate of nearly 5% in the third quarter, from July to October this year, which was the strongest pace since 2021. This is especially remarkable given that the country has seen the highest interest rates in more than 15 years. Additionally, unemployment has been steadily declining since the pandemic spike in April of 2020. It has been under 4% for the longest continuous period of time since the 1960s. With these recent improvements, the Biden administration has begun to focus their campaign on the economy, even coining the term Bidenomics.
Bidenomics is about building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down.
Biden credits the economic improvements to his work on job growth and the government investments in industries. These improvements were highlighted in Biden's State of the Union address in February, indicating that this will be used as a selling point in the upcoming election. Despite these improvements, voters are still not entirely satisfied with Biden's economic decisions. In a Wall Street Journal poll, only 37% of respondents approved Biden's job on the economy, and just 34% approved of his work on inflation. Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner for the presidential race, has been extremely critical of Biden's handling of the economy. He has even accused the administration of lying about the unemployment and inflation rates without any evidence. It's difficult to foreshadow the future of the economy. Some experts and many citizens are still worried about their economic stability. The economy will certainly be a deciding factor in the upcoming election.
Thanks, Fiona.
One of the biggest foreign policy debates in the upcoming election is whether to continue funding Ukraine in its war against Russia. The U.S. has given billions of dollars so far, but some politicians believe that should stop. Politicat's Jeremy Fredericks speaks to experts about this funding debate.
The State Department has given nearly $44 billion to Ukraine since its war with Russia broke out last year. NU Ambassador in Residence Ian Kelly previously led the State Department's Office of Russian Affairs. He says U.S. funding is providing vital supplies to the Ukrainian army.
Being used as kind of a deterrence in terms of especially air defense.
But now that funding is facing delays, Republicans in the House and on the campaign trail are calling for a pause in aid.
You have to give a blank check for the proxy war also in Ukraine. It would have never happened if we were president.
Journalist and NU professor Christina Pashkin has covered Ukraine for more than a decade and made a documentary on Crimea.
The more they delay, the worse it gets for Ukraine, right? And they need that weaponry and they need that funding as soon as possible in order to defeat Russia.
Other Republican candidates, Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell and President Joe Biden are calling for continued support.
Both Biden and McConnell, I think, are hoping that they can get the Ukraine money through.
Last week, the House passed a bill that gives over $14 billion in funding to Israel without any money for Ukraine. If it makes its way through the Senate, National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby says the president is expected to veto this bill.
They're still outnumbered by pro-Ukraine Republicans, but as we see with the House, that minority group within the Republican Party still has a lot of power to stop that funding.
Debates at home on U.S. involvement abroad. Jeremy Fredericks, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Jeremy. Polls show shifting support for funding Ukraine. Gallup finds that more than 4 in 10 Americans say the U.S. is doing too much in the war, up from 28% at the beginning of the year.
The Democratic National Convention will be held in Chicago next summer. Politicat's Victoria Ryan explains why the Windy City was chosen over the other ones.
Last April, the Democratic National Committee chose the Windy City to host its national convention in August 2024. Chicago beat out bids from Houston, Atlanta, and New York in a strategic move from the Democrats. Let's break down the factors that played into this decision. Biden won 57% of the vote in Illinois and over 74% in Cook County in 2020. It is a solidly blue state with historical ties to the modern Democratic Party. Former President Obama was a senator of Illinois prior to becoming president, and he posted this tweet in response to show his support of the party's decision. In addition, the Democrats decided on Chicago due to its alignment with values that the Democrats are prioritizing in this election, such as labor unions. Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth elaborated at a press conference soon after the decision to host the DNC was announced.
The Midwest, and especially this city, Chicago, is a stronghold of labor. We protect workers' rights because we know that working families are the backbone of our nation's economy.
Biden's recent support of the auto workers' strike and support of labor unions further displays the Democrats' focus. Beyond the Chicagoland area, the Midwest is also a strategic location. A press release from the Democratic Party hailed the Midwest as a critical Democratic stronghold, saying the so-called blue wall of Midwestern states such as Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois were critical to victories in 2020 and 2022. However, when looking at electoral trends, both Michigan and Wisconsin voted for former President Trump in 2016 and then flipped to vote for President Biden in 2020 by less than 3 percentage points. The Midwest holds political significance for this election as both parties attempt to gain control of these battleground states. The Republican National Convention will be held in nearby Milwaukee in July 2024. With all eyes on the Midwest, both sides of the aisle are preparing to select their nominee for president, and Chicago is at the center of it all for the Democrats.
Thanks, Victoria.
Coming up, getting out the vote. How one NU organization is helping Northwestern students cast their ballots.
And turning away from Biden, how a key block of voters could cost him his presidential bid. We'll take a look after the break.
Ready, set, now!
I'm Kelly McEvers, founding host of the NPR podcast Embedded.
I'm James Edwards, host of the Unresolved podcast from Frontline.
I'm Antonia Cereijido, former senior producer of Anything for Selena podcast and current executive producer at Elias Studios.
One, two, three, four.
Biden is facing increasing blowback from a voting bloc that may have won him the presidency in 2020. Politicat's Jack Viveris is here to explain these shifts amongst youth voters.
May not need young voters to win 2024, but it's a whole lot more difficult without them. In the 2020 presidential election, voters age 18 to 29 supported Biden over Trump by 24 percentage points. This bloc of voters has been leaning Democratic since the 2004 election. But what was so surprising in 2020 wasn't the amount of youth support, it was the youth turnout. Roughly half of all young Americans voted in 2020, an 11-point increase from 2016, and likely the highest rate since the voting age was lowered to 18 in 1971, according to data from the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement at Tufts University. The 2022 midterms were mostly the same, with the second highest young voter turnout in 30 years. Maxwell Frost, the first member of Generation Z elected to Congress, said this about the midterms.
But I think this is actually a bigger message to everybody else, to not count young people out of the process, not count young people out of anything.
However, things seem to have gotten worse for the president. While Biden's approval rating has suffered all around, according to a recent poll conducted by Quinnipiac University, just 25% of voters age 18 to 35 now have a favorable view of Biden. Most of this dissatisfaction revolves around Biden's policy struggles, especially on issues like climate change and military aid to Israel. Biden's age, an issue across voting groups, is also a factor. If successful in 2024, Biden would be the oldest elected president in U.S. history. So how can Biden recapture this group? A big opportunity could be advertising the policy gains that he does have, such as the Bipartisan Safe Communities Act. Democrats also hope that young voters' enthusiasm for abortion rights, a key 2024 issue, will drive turnout. If it doesn't, Republicans could benefit. Recent polls have found frontrunner Donald Trump leading Biden among young voters by a narrow margin, signaling what could be a massive shift. But the most likely scenario may be neither Trump nor Biden. Young voters traditionally vote at a much lower rate than the general public. And with dissatisfaction all around, the most common vote may be the one not cast.
Thanks, Jack.
NU Votes simplifies the voting process for Northwestern students. Politicat's Micah Sandy talks with an NU Votes fellow about what they plan for the upcoming election year.
For students looking to vote while at Northwestern and away from their hometowns, NU Votes offers services to help them vote in the nearby area or remotely for their home city. According to their site, 70% of eligible undergraduate and graduate students voted either in Illinois or their home state in 2016. Illinois' next state election will be the general primary on March 19th. Here's what one NU Votes fellow says about their club's planning for Election Day.
On voter day, one of the services we also do is we have a voter van, and we'll literally rent a van and decorate it with voting, decorations. And we'll go, and if there are any students in the area who are voting here with their Northwestern addresses or just happen to be in the general Evanston area, then we'll actually drive them to a polling location so that they can go and vote.
The best preparation so far, according to Billups, has been raising awareness. This is done during Wildcat Welcome and at resource fairs, but also through other efforts throughout the year.
We'll be outside dining halls. We'll be just at the Norris University Center and offer those services multiple times throughout the quarter so that we can get as many students registered and active as possible.
With recruitment bearing importance similar to awareness, NU Votes is looking for ambassadors for the upcoming election cycle.
More information about NU Votes services can be found on their website, nuvotes.org.
Coming up, should there be an age maximum for presidential candidacy? Politicat's Ananya Chugh asked Northwestern students in a special Politicat edition of Rock Talk after the break.
My relationship with Giannis is unique. We're from the same country, we're from the same city. Being a Northwestern alum, I think, has tremendous advantages in the sports industry. To me, that community, it's been with me for 20 plus years.
Trying to work my way out of the prison system was the most difficult challenge of my life. It only became tangible once I became a Northwestern student.
Welcome back. A question at the back of the mind of all voters this year: how old is too old to run for president? Ananya Chugh gathered some answers from the NU community.
With the 2024 presidential elections only a year away, it's only natural that Northwestern students should be curious to see who's going to continue to be in running. If Biden wins, he'll be the oldest person ever to be elected to the White House. But the question still stands: should there be an age maximum on presidential candidates? Let's find out.
Once you get to a certain age, it just impairs how you think.
Just as it's fair to make
people wait until they're 18. After a certain point, if you're not going to be around through the entirety of the presidency, or if there's a chance of that happening, and also the ideals change with the age of the people.
I think that there should be an age limit because if you're making decisions that will impact the future, you should be there and be willing to accept the consequences of those decisions.
At a certain age, you become out of touch with what the nation wants, because I think we have a lot of young members who are striving for change, and it just kind of, I think the age barrier just really doesn't allow for some of the presidents that we've had to understand kind of what change needs to happen.
I think absolutely. I think for the president to really represent the population, it can't be someone who was raised in a generation so different from most Americans today.
So I think in general there should not be an age max for presidential candidacy because I feel like everyone should have the same opportunity to do that when they are able to, but I think there also should be a cognitive test or a mental capacity test so that they're able to pass that.
Northwestern students continuing to weigh in. Ananya Chugh, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Ananya.
That's all the time we have for tonight's Politicat special. I'm Lena Peterson.
And I'm Lance Wilhelm. For all of us here at NNN, good night and thanks for watching.